Welcome to Thursday Book Club. I'm coming to you from Gadigal land of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past and present and storytellers everywhere. For anyone new, my name's Suzanne Leal. I'm the author of 5 novels, and in a week it'll be 6 when I get the Year 8 We Escaped published and out in the world. As many of you all know, we started Thursday Book Club during COVID, and it was a way of uniting people online where we really couldn't be united anywhere else. So 5 years on, can you believe it? I can't believe it's actually 5 years since COVID started. We've been going strong, and we've got a strong community. We've got new people that come, and people come and go and stay, and it's been a delight. It's delightful too that Jacqueline was one of our early visitors, our early guest authors with her debut book, The Truth About Her. And now, to my delight, Jacqueline's agreed to come back, and she'll be talking to us today about her new book, which is a corker, and it's called Lonely Mouth. And there it is. Welcome to you, Jacqueline.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really nice to be here.
Now, the novel's been out for a few weeks now. I think it's came out at the end of April. How are you? Is it a bit of a sigh, a bit of a high still, or is there a slump? What's the
No,
buzz?
I mean it's been a really busy time because it's been professionally busy as well. Because I write for the Herald, so there's been an election. Obviously, the book came out the same week as the election, so that was all a bit hectic, and exhausting. But since then, it's been delightful. It's my second book, so the first one I think is probably it's. I feel more relaxed this time around, and I feel like I can enjoy the ride a little bit more. So it's been lovely. It's so nice. Like it's just so nice to have people read the book and connect with it and talk to me about the characters as though they're real people because they're real people to me too.
There's always a bit of a concern about writing the second novel. It's notoriously
Mm.
difficult. It's the hump before you hit your stride. I don't feel that from you, but how did Lonely Mouth come? Was it a hard book to write? Was it an easier book to write?
It was sort of both of those things at the same time or at different times. But I definitely felt that second novel sort of thing. And I know people talk about the notorious difficult second book or the difficult second album or whatever. And I took a lot longer with this one. I think I was supposed to give my publisher a manuscript in like May 2023, and it ended up being, I think it was at least a year later than that. So I don't even know now. Like it's all a bit of a blur. But so it took a much longer time. The pandemic intervened. So my first book came out in the pandemic, and then I was sort of trying to write the second one, particularly sort of during the second lockdown, and that was not okay and just didn't work for me. I just didn't get any work done at that time. So it was, yeah, in that way, it was much more difficult. I was juggling a lot more with my child at school and work. But I found when I came to the actual writing and when I did have time to sit down and really connect with the material, I felt a bit more assured and a bit more, I suppose, like my voice was a bit more confident. But having said that, like it did go through a few drafts, and like I hope the stitches in it are relatively invisible, but it's definitely got some strong stitching through it, if that makes sense.
It's a hard thing to write something that requires deep thought when life doesn't allow for the
Yeah.
time for deep thought.
Yes.
And this is something that's occurred to me. And what I like about long form prose is that you do get time to think, and
Mm.
the thinking is called work. But it seems to me that as a journalist, there is deep thought, but there's also a very firm deadline. How do you find that analysis with the need to meet times all the time?
I mean, it's really difficult. I find it difficult to write my novel and to do my journalism all in the same sort of week, if you know what I mean. So the way I manage with my creative work is to sort of take bigger chunks of time whenever I can. And even if that means that the book takes much longer, it's just sort of how I roll. I find that I need to get into a sort of a groove with fiction writing where you need a lot of space in your mind. So, and you probably feel this as well. You need to let your thoughts meander and to let your to just open up a lot of mental space and psychological space. And you sort of almost have the opposite when you're trying to write journalism or you're trying to have meet deadlines just over a week in the job because there's this sort of really tyrannical notion that you have to keep across everything, which means you're always sort of trying to cycle through the news so that you've at least got a brief understanding of most of the things that you need to understand. And I write columns as well, so I try to read really widely for that in terms of journalism and current affairs. So it's sort of that is almost like an opposite mental process to like book writing, which is like I need to stare out the window. I need to be reading a lot of really, really good literature, which I'm always doing anyway, but really reading it and thinking about it and digesting it. And I just need a lot of blank space. Like I need to be like my new puppy and just sort of like stare into space for large stretches of the day and sleep. She sleeps a lot.
So in Harry Potter, you might know that Hermione comes across this spell where she can be in two places at exactly the same time.
Mm,
As far as I'm aware, we haven't quite managed that yet. So when you say you leave your creative writing for great blocks of time,
mm.
where are they?
Where are they? Good question. I've taken a lot of I've basically taken a lot of annual leave. One of the good things about journalism is that we get 6 weeks of leave a year. So I have used some of that, and then I took a bit of time off. I think I took some long service leave for this book as well. And then I would just try to steal weekends and basically just whenever I could. I think I took a bit of leave without pay. It's all a bit of a blur, but it was basically leave. Like I'm not one of those writers who can sort of get up at 5 a.m. and write, 500 words before they skip off to work happily. Like I just don't think I could do that. And certainly when I get home and I've put my daughter to bed and done all of that stuff, I'm too tired. So it's not a creative zone for me. Yeah, so for me, it's about trying to take chunks of time.
And if creative writing was a job in which you could earn a very good living,
Yeah.
would you stay a journalist?
Yeah, that's so funny. I was thinking about that today because um, we were joking about, yeah, the Reese Witherspoon buying like the option for my book and how I'd be able to retire on the royalties and stuff. Because yeah, it's as you know, it's not unless you're sort of like a major best-selling author, and I think there's probably not many authors at all in Australia who can make a decent living just from their novels. So if I had the choice, if I won the lottery tomorrow, I don't think I would give up journalism because I love it so much, and I also really, really enjoy work. I enjoy that sense of I love my colleagues. It's a really fun workplace. The esprit de corps of the newsroom is just sort of something you can't replicate anywhere else. There's no one more sort of more wicked and interesting and funny and smart and full of great gossip than fellow journalists. And I like being part of the sort of press of humanity of going into the office. And I think I really miss that in COVID. So I like getting dressed up and getting on the train and being part of that sort of that throng. So in answer to your question, I'd probably take more time off and I would probably maybe go part-time or something, but I don't think I would give up my day job, no.
I think sometimes, writing into yourself, you can sort of spiral and then all that's left is your own world. Whereas
Yeah,
you're not only getting out into the world, you're engaged in other people's world because you're investigating people. I mean, in a way that
yeah.
I was a tribunal member, but you're really getting into other people's stories. So every time you get to work, there's a new story that can engage you, I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And being a journalist gives you this amazing ability to pry into other people's lives and to ask questions of people that you would have no license to do otherwise. And it gives you a sort of an open window on the world. And most journalists, good journalists, are very curious people. So I think that's a common trait with good novelist. You have to be curious about the world around you. You have to be curious about the way people tick. You have to want to know things and be open to things. So it's a perfect kind of profession in that way for my personality type. But and I think if I was home all the time writing on my own, I'd probably get really lonely, actually. I would miss, I would feel like I feel like I need contact with the world and engagement to the world to feed back into my books anyway.
Yeah. Let's go to the book now. Um, for me, Lonely Mouth is the story of two sisters. There's Matilda and there's Lara. They're 10 years apart. They live on different sides of the earth. And they really are, it's their friendship and their chaotic family that forms for me the kernel of the book. Can you just, for those people who haven't read your book yet, can you tell me a bit about Matilda and then Lara?
Yeah, so Matilda and Lara are sort of technically half sisters. So they have the same mother, Barbara, who's a very sort of chaotic and you might say narcissistic mother, but they have different fathers. And one of the fathers is a character in the book, Lara's father. She's the younger sister, and the other father we don't meet. And Lara and Matilda, the book opens with a prologue where Lara and Matilda, when they're sort of young, are abandoned by their mother, Barbara, who's sort of having a nervous breakdown at a truck stop at the Big Merino in Goulburn, New South Wales. And then we fast forward to the present day when, as Susan says, they're sort of the two sisters are scattered across the globe, and the story really centres on Matilda. It's in her voice. She's the older sister, and her life in a restaurant in Sydney, which is sort of like a buzzy, cool restaurant. And then Lara's father sort of comes back into the girls' lives and comes back into Barbara's life and sort of wants a reckoning and a reconciliation, and that blows everything apart.
I have a really strong image physically of Lara, perhaps because she's tall. Can you just tell us what Lara looks like, and then for you, what Matilda is like physically? How would we recognize the two of them together?
Yeah, yeah, it's really interesting because I thought a lot about how Lara would look, and I actually cut out photos of girls who might look like her. So she's 19 and 20 in the book. She is exquisitely beautiful and she works as a fashion model. So that is a big, I was very interested in the idea of beauty and how that affects a person's character and how it affects the way the world is reflected back at you when you're an exquisitely beautiful person. So she is obviously very tall, she's very slim, she's very angular. She has a sort of unself-consciousness about her appearance. She's very, I don't want to say transactional, but she's very businesslike in the way that she views her beauty and her body. It's like a sort of asset that she takes care of, but she doesn't have any vanity in the sense of neuroticism about the way she looks. That, you know, Matilda definitely does. Um, and I always pictured her because she sort of gets a pixie cut halfway through the book. So I always pictured her as this one particular model that I saw a photo of. I think it was in Milan Fashion Week, a street photo, and she has a kind of heart-shaped face, quite an angular jaw, and this beautiful. If it was long, it would be sort of beautiful long curly hair, but it's very short, so it's around the head, and that just brings out the beauty of her sort of facial features and her eyes.
And Matilda, how does Matilda look? She's less physically described, I think.
Yeah, I know, and I sort of made that I made that choice quite consciously because it's always this thing of like, you know, when you're writing female characters, like, is she going to be a beauty? Is she going to be mousy? Is she going to be like Jane Eyre, who's got a pair of very fine eyes, but is otherwise pretty plain, you know, as we're constantly told during Jane Eyre. So it just feels like such a political choice when you have to describe your female character's appearance. And so I very deliberately didn't really describe Matilda's appearance much. And to me, she is a smaller person than Lara. And I think she's a brunette. And she's slight and she's very, very slim, but she doesn't think that she is because she has a sort of disordered relationship with eating in her body.
The book is called Lonely Mouth, which when I picked it up, I thought it's a really weird title. And as you go on, it becomes less weird. Tell me first of all, how the title game came to be and what it means.
Yeah, so I just sort of read this. I read about this concept, which is one of those delightful things that the Japanese have a word for that we don't have a word for in English. And I won't try to pronounce the Japanese word, but the rough translation of it in English is lonely mouth. And it's a word for the feeling that you have when you kind of, I mean, at a most literal level, it's like peckish, but it's basically when you are searching for something and you know you want something in your mouth, but you're not really sure what it is. And I thought that that was such a fascinating concept. I think everybody knows how that feels physically, but I also thought that it was such a kind of incredible stand-in for just basically like the whole human condition, that we're all searching for something and wanting something and craving something and constantly trying to find it. But we don't really know what it is that we want. And sometimes when we get what we think we want, it doesn't satiate us anyway. So that to me was just a really powerful concept. And I'd already been thinking that I wanted to write something that was set in a restaurant for various reasons. And I had this kind of idea about sisters that was running alongside it. And then it all sort of, yeah, it sort of swirled together in my thought process that way.
But these aren't just sort of sisters that we might have met and grown up with them as they grow up. They had quite a disordered childhood and quite disordered care.
Hmm.
Um, where did that interest in this chaos of the early family come from for you?
I mean, it's funny, I didn't really set out to write a book about a so-called dysfunctional family. It just I had this idea about Matilda quite early on. I had one of the first scenes I wrote was sort of the scene where Matilda's being, as a teenager, is being driven through the sort of the green streets of the North Shore to one of her foster homes, and that was just sort of a scene that came to me about this young woman who I knew, or young girl who I knew was being driven into a foster home, and her sort of being dumped there. Um, and then I sort of started creating the backstory from there. I was very interested in the idea of two sisters or siblings having a different experience in the same family, because I think that's quite common. And I really wanted to dramatize that. So, in the case of Lara and Matilda, there's a 10-year age gap. So, Lara hasn't seen a lot of the things that Matilda has seen. She hasn't been damaged in the same way by the experiences that Matilda's had. And Matilda is sort of the keeper of a lot of the memories that Lara was too little to be awake to. And so Lara's kind of gotten off scot-free, and Matilda has um, borne the weight of all of that. And also, she's sort of tried to be a sort of a carer or a big sister, a sort of almost like a substitute mother for Lara in a lot of ways. So I was interested in all of that, and I liked the idea of splishing. I'd read The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead, which is an incredible novel, and I read an interview with him about his creation of that novel, and he had, it's centered around two boys who've got really different personalities, and he sort of said that he split his own psyche. So one of the boys is optimistic and idealistic and youthful and carefree, and the other one's quite cynical and bitter and hardened, and much more realistic about the way the world works. And I thought that was such an interesting idea, that you could sort of give traits of your own to two different characters and then have them kind of interact with each other and come into conflict with each other. So I sort of copied that idea as much as I could. Um, and yeah, I wanted them to be quite different in their styles and have quite different experiences, and to see how that played out on the page.
I can just come to your job or your experience as a journalist. I've read The Nickel Boys as well, and it's very compelling. It's about a residential care centre rather than foster home placements,
Hmm.
and it's very raw how you describe the foster home placements, um, in a way that I imagine you'd require testimony rather than academic works about.
Hmm.
Yeah. How did you get into the head of Matilda and the awkwardness of coming into a family time and time again?
Yeah. Yeah, she has a kind of consistent experience of being an outsider in other people's families, but also I really, really thought and read a lot about the sort of the concept of gratefulness. So like the exhaustingness of having to be grateful all the time and having to feel obligated, and people are giving you things all the time and you have no ability to return the favor. And that's the life of a child. And most of us take it completely for granted. But if those people giving you stuff are not your parents, but they're the state or their foster parents, or even sort of very, very well-meaning other adult carers, you can't take it for granted in quite the same way, and you can't feel entitled in quite the same way. And so that's really deeply, deeply ingrained in Matilda, that she finds it very difficult to take things, to allow herself to be given things. And so she doesn't give herself a lot either, in terms of nourishment, or anything. And in terms of, I mean, I did a bit of research. I had written on and off about foster parents and foster children, like, and abandoned children, if that's the term we use, or mothers who are trying to get their children back. That was one really interesting story I wrote a while ago. After they'd been placed into care. So I sort of felt like I had a little bit of experience of sort of having interviewed some people who were in this situation. And then otherwise I just sort of read, and then I just used my imagination. Yeah.
And what other research was fundamental to this book? Hands-on research or reading research?
Yeah, so it's set in a restaurant in Sydney, and I wanted the restaurant almost to be a character in the book. And I was so interested in the idea of a restaurant kitchen, um, being this sort of pinnacle of human achievement or human cooperation, and the ability of humans to um, get on with each other and produce something. And it just seemed to me it's a microcosm of that incredible ability that we have that no other species sort of does, which is the ability to cooperate. And yet, this sort of, I call it like a human infested machine. The restaurant kitchen, it's also full of really big personalities, a lot of egos, and some pretty wild characters, right? As most restaurant kitchens are. So there's interdependence built into the system, but there's also necessarily conflict built into the system, and we have to rely on each other, but we always are going to be in conflict with each other as well. So that was the reason that the restaurant needed to just like absolutely jump off the page as a real thing. So I've read a lot of books. I went to a lot of restaurants. I like going to restaurants. I really like going to restaurants. So, I would take notes, or like I would sit up at the bar. So, I love a restaurant with an open kitchen, so you can kind of watch what everyone's doing. And then I worked in a restaurant. So I worked as a waitress for like a friend of a friend's restaurant in the inner west. And I didn't like work there for months or anything. I just kind of did a few shifts and was at the very much the bottom rung, but I got to see nightly service and the sort of the rhythm and the energy of it. So that was really cool. And that was very informative. Yeah.
And I think what you give to Matilda as the front of house manager is the real sense of an absolute career. I mean, she
Yeah.
really is CEO of the restaurant. Yes, the chef's very important, but without her, everything collapses potentially.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And Matilda's a very ordered person. She values organization. She likes to tell herself that she has high executive function. She's one of these people who can manage a lot of things at a lot of different times, and she's incredibly highly organized, right? So that's sort of the opposite to, the sort of flamboyant creative chef type who actually does the magic in the kitchen. So she knows that they need her, but she also, and the whole show wouldn't be able to run without her, but she also doesn't want to be the main player, and she doesn't want to be the talent, if you like. She doesn't want to be up in spotlight. She doesn't want any glory, but she needs to be indispensable. And so that's the position that she's created for herself. And also because she has a sort of complicated or disordered relationship with food, she likes, it's no accident that she's ended up working in a restaurant where she is next to food all the time, but she doesn't really allow herself access to it in a normal way. And I wanted her to be a kind of person who was like, it was like she's got her nose pressed against the glass of life, really. And she's looking in, and watching other people, help themselves to it, but she doesn't quite think she's entitled to it.
And isn't that the whole nature of service, food service, that you prepare something beautifully? If the clients were to see you swipe it just for
Mm,
that's not impressive. So it is that glass, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
present it, but you don't take it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's an act of devotion in a way.
Mm.
But there's something very orderly about it and powerful about it. And I think that's what Matilda likes. She likes the concept of mise en place, which is, the French term for chefy term for having everything in its place. So and a well-ordered kitchen has good mise en place, and that's how she likes her kitchen or the restaurant to run, but also how she likes to run her own life.
Got a couple more questions, but I'm just mindful of the time. So, for everybody here tonight, if you had a question for Jacqueline, now's your time to pop it in the chat. So, those of you who are less used to Zoom, just down on the bottom, you should see a toolbar and there'll be one that says chat. So, if you could just write down your question and I'll ask Jacqueline, and I'll just keep an eye on the chat room while I'm talking. Um, Jacqueline, you're at Sydney Writers Festival this week.
Yeah.
And from my research, I understand you're at Wallara Library in Double Bay tomorrow.
Yes, at 10:30, I think, which will be delightful.
And my understanding is that if that people are still welcome to come. I don't know if
Oh
you're
yeah, 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 absolutely.
exhausted. So it's a great library, and it'll be a terrific conversation. So they'll have you just to yourself. It's focused on you, isn't it? It's an in conversation. And then you have in the afternoon, Encourage Works What Women Want. Do you know what women want?
No, I can't even work out what I want. So yeah, it's a big ask. It's a big ask. I guess we'll chew it over, but I don't know if we'll definitively settle the question.
Well, look, with Deb Oswald and Holly Wainwright, you should be in good hands.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
And then on Sunday, I understand you're doing coffee and headlines, which is one of the sessions I always like.
Yes, nice and early on Sunday morning for anyone who's drifting in with coffee and croissants.
And what do you do there?
On the for the Well,
Um,
it's morning headlines. So I think we go through the papers and we sort of talk about um what's in the papers. And I guess, the news of the week. So it's me and Michael Williams, I think, from the monthlies running it. And I actually don't know who else to say. It'll be another couple of journalists. So it'll be like, I'm sure we'll end up talking about the week in politics a lot.
can I ask you with the Pope, did you have anything to do with that? And was there research done as to who might or might not be Pope, or were you focused on the election?
No, I was not on Pope duty at all. I've sort of watched it with great interest, like the pageantry of it and yeah, the sort of ancientness of it. But no, I didn't do anything popey. I've just been pretty focused on the election and stuff.
Yes, yes. Um, Not too focused to think about some book recommendations for us.
Oh yeah.
Seven, three, or perhaps three that are really seven. Tell me about recommendations.
I know, I really cheated. The first one that I recommend is Asymmetry, which is by Lisa Halliday. So this is a debut that was published in 2018. It's just a really, really interesting book. I don't even really know how to describe it, but the author, who is like a young New Yorker, sort of famously had an affair with Philip Roth, which I think a lot of young female New Yorkers did. But she wrote the first section. It's a book in three sections, and the first section is about a young woman who has an affair with an older writer called Ezra Klein, and it's fantastically written. It's beautifully sort of evocative of a certain kind of slice of Manhattan. And it's actually kind of beautifully melancholic, and a lot of it is just really, really beautifully written and snappy dialogue between the two characters. And then it shifts in the second part completely to a story that seems completely unconnected, of an Iraqi Kurdish man who's stuck in limbo in immigration at Heathrow Airport. And then the third section goes somewhere else entirely. It's incredibly, incredibly well written. It's incredibly strange and inventive, and the narrative structure just really, really split open my conception of what you could do with a novel.
Wow. And True Grit.
Yeah, True Grit. I mean, I don't know. Like, I actually only read this one this year or end of last year. So it's a novella by Charles Portis. I think it was published in 1968. And it's, I guess it's not exactly a Western, but it's been made into a film, which I think is nothing can be as good as this novel. It's basically a small, perfectly written gem. I think it might be the most perfect novel of all time. It's a quest story. It's an adventure story, and it's told from the perspective of Maddie, of Maddie Ross, who's 14 years old during the events of the novel that she's narrating, but she's narrating it as she's an older woman. And it has one of the greatest characters ever rendered in literature, which is Rooster Cogburn, who's a US marshal with one eye and a drinking problem, who helps Maddie Cogburn sort of wreak revenge on the man who killed her father. And I don't even know how to describe this book except to say it's perfect, and everyone should read it.
I looked at it and I thought, God, sounds like a Western, but I mean, you've
Yeah,
me around. I don't like Westerns.
that's the prejudice that I would have had as well.
Yeah.
But I just you will literally be gasping at the last pages of this novel, and there is no finer voice in literature than this young woman. So it's fantastic.
Wow. And last but not least, your series.
Yeah, so this is a bit sneaky of me. This is the Cazalet Chronicles, which are actually 5 books, and I just read them. I started reading them over the Christmas holidays, and then I just wasn't able to stop, so I just powered through all 5 of them. And it's an sort of a saga written by Elizabeth Jane Howard, who was married to Kingsley Amis, and was a sort of she was a popular author in her time, but not particularly noted because she was married to Kingsley Amis, who was this huge kind of boorish personality, and he was, such a famous British author. His reputation really overshadowed hers, and she's been rediscovered a lot more as in later years. And these books are a saga of a sort of upper middle class family in England that it starts after the First World War, and then finishes. The saga finishes after the Second World War, and so it's a portrait of amazing social change, but you get incredibly invested in the characters of this huge and sprawling family. And also, it's very, very ahead of its time in the way that it depicts the real lives of women, the working lives of women, the drudgery of domestic labour, and all of the kind of, yeah, they're very female books in a way, even though they don't present as that.
It's so compelling. I just want to read all of them.
Oh, the Cazalet Chronicles are so marvelous. Like, they're just so good.
We've got a couple of questions, some comments and a question. Maureen has said the book shows how family and your upbringing shape your life, which I think
Yeah.
really. And Dina Davis, who is a fellow writer, she says, your book sounds fascinating. Is your character with disordered eating suffering from anorexia nervosa?
No, she's not. She's more of a binger and a purger. So again, I kind of it's funny, I didn't mean to write I didn't set out to write a novel about bulimia or about even a bulimic character. It was just in the creation of Matilda and in having her kind of it was a dramatization, I suppose, of the dilemma that she has in herself of not feeling like she has she's entitled to partake in things that other people in life, really. So it was a dramatization of that, and I didn't mean to write about bulimia, but it just sort of happened. But yeah, she's what we would call bulimic, I guess.
Rachel Lee, also a writer, she said, loved your debut, Jacqueline, and looking forward to reading Lonely Mouth. Sounds terrific.
That's nice.
And just before you let you go, Jacqueline, could you give me a number in between 1, 2, 3, 20, between 1 and 20, please?
Oh, okay. 17.
Good. Okay. Everyone talk amongst themselves while I sort this out. 1, 2,
I'm intrigued. Is this like a puzzle or something?
3, 14. 16, 17. There we go. It is my digitally highbrow raffle.
Oh, okay, great.
Raffle. So I think some people have a digital um,
No.
wheel,
Oh,
but
yeah.
I have a counting system.
Yeah.
And I'm delighted to announce that Bob is the winner of our raffle. And Bob, if you could send me an email with your postal address, then your surprise may well be relevant to tonight's conversation, will be on its way.
Good on you, Bob.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. Thank you very much, everybody else, for attending, and good luck with the rest of the promotion and the festival and the work and the childcare.
Yeah. and all of it. Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for everyone who tuned in. It was a real pleasure. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. See you. See you next week, everybody. Bye-bye. Bye,
Bye.
Jackie.